Only 4 starting quarterbacks in the NFL currently have won a Super Bowl. An amazing statistic. One of those, Patrick Mahomes. What do the Chiefs have to do to get back to the Super Bowl next year? And the Philadelphia Eagles, the same story. Offseason, how do they maneuver their way back to a Super Bowl appearance and hopefully winning a Super Bowl for them with Jalen Hurts in 2024 February? All that and more on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. A little interesting nugget that I saw you tweet out yesterday, Matt, and shout out to the great Mel Kiper. Some people, first of all, can I start with some Mel Kiper appreciation?
Yeah.
The godfather of draft coverage. There was growing up, there was one guy doing it. And it was Mel Kiper, and it was Joel Bushbaum that did the Pro Football Weekly book, right? And so that was it. And I was, as a young NFL draft geek from an early age, that was it. And so the OGs, rest in peace, Bushbaum, and Mel Kiper was the OG. So I don't care if his analysis is bad these days. I don't care about any of it. Love the hair. I want to see him on TV talking about the draft until he can't do it anymore. I love it. But
I got to take that over too. Were you done? Or sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
His blue book that he doesn't put out anymore, I'm betting I own every one of them he's ever put out. I mean, because he started around 1980. I was 7 at that point, and that's when I started to care about the draft. And I read every word of every one of those blue books 5 times. I mean, because there was no internet. I mean, you just got the blue book. He had a mock draft in the back, that was super outdated. I mean, it's 3 months ahead of the draft. And I read every profile over and over and over and over. And once, he probably doesn't remember, there was a handful of us that all went out to dinner. He was one of them during my ESPN days. And I was like, wow, I'm sitting here next to Mel Kiper. How cool is that? So he's a legend.
How was the hair in real life?
Oh, it didn't let you down at all. Yeah. As impressive as Javon Hargrave's backside in person.
Yes. Call back to the last, if you don't know what that means, last mailbag episode. We had a little bit of fun there. Mel Kiper's wife, a hairdresser, by the way. So if you're wondering why
I didn't know that
his hair is so nice, he's got some in-house knowledge of how to make that happen. But a great nugget that he dropped yesterday.
Yes, I was listening to their podcast with Todd McShay, and Todd and I got hired the same time at ESPN. He's doing great. And Mel mentioned this. He said, there's only 4 starting quarterbacks that won a Super Bowl. And I'm like, is that real? So I dug into it, and I'm not counting Chad Henne getting the ring a couple days ago. I mean, started a Super Bowl. Flacco and Foles, I'm not counting. And you did the research on this. Flacco is a free agent at the moment. Foles is under a 2-year contract, 1 more year with the Colts, but certainly could be a cap casualty. But they're not starting quarterbacks.
And they may not be in the league this year. We don't know for sure. And Joe Flacco, what is he even doing toiling around as a number 3 quarterback for the Jets with that quarterback situation? Right. It really feels like it's time for Joe Flacco to hang him up. And look, more power to him. If he wants to play till he's 45 as a backup, go ahead, do your thing, Joe Flacco. But it wouldn't be completely shocking if once draft day rolls around, once week 1 rolls around, Flacco and maybe even Foles too could be unemployed. So no guarantee they're in the league currently, and definitely not starters in the league. But it's amazing that only 4 current starting quarterbacks have won Super Bowls in the NFL after the retirement of Tom Brady.
Yeah, and it's Mahomes, it's Rodgers, it's Wilson, and Stafford. And between the 4 of them, they have 5 rings. It's not like Brady retiring obviously screws us up a little bit. I mean, it's timely with Brady retiring. And you had a great nugget before this. 1 year from now, the 2024 season, Flacco's not going to be in the league. Is Foles going to be in the league? Probably not. Rodgers might not be. Wilson may have collapsed and may not even be a starter at that point. Stafford almost hung it up this year.
Yeah.
Like if Mahomes, let's say Mahomes repeats and no one else gets to added to the list, it could go down to 1 or 2. I mean, 4 might seem like a lot.
It could conceivably be one starting quarterback in the NFL in 2024 has a Super Bowl ring, and it's Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, as a starter, right. And if he starts monopolizing Super Bowl appearances like Brady did, doesn't leave a lot of windows. I mean, even the ones he loses, that's just not a lot of opportunities for Allen and Burrow and all these other dudes. And this could be let's make this a little bit longer conversation. If we get the Eagles tomorrow, we get the Eagles tomorrow. But I find this really interesting because as you were bringing us in, I went to drafthistory.com and just wanted to look at the first round quarterbacks. Why is there this gap? Well, first of all, of course, we just lost Brady. Recently lost Ben. Rivers. He doesn't have a win. Eli. Breeze. There's a long list of Hall of Famers that have
Peyton Manning, obviously, and there's going to be a backlog, and there's going to be a whole bunch of Hall of Fame quarterbacks coming up in very near future for Hall of Fame classes. Basically, starting next year through the next 5, there's going to be first ballot guys.
Yeah, without question. So Bradford was drafted in 2010, and as mentioned, he's already looking like an old man. But there's an amazing gap between Stafford. The league really got shorted on quarterbacks. Here's the first rounders since Stafford. Cam Newton, retired. Locker, Gabbert, Ponder, Luck. That's the one that killed the league because Luck could have carried the mantle. You know what I mean?
Yep. He was going to be the conduit that carried the league from the old guard to the new guard as the guy. And that's a rough one. That sucks for the fans. It sucks for, Luck's career, how that ended up going. A bummer when you think about what that looks like. By the way, he's in my neck of the woods at Stanford right now, getting a graduate degree, and I think wants to maybe go into coaching. So we might not have seen the last of Andrew Luck as it pertains to football. I don't know if he's trying to go to the NFL level, but I think he's going to I think he wants to be a high school head coach basically when he's done with this.
Okay. And Russell Wilson's the same class. So let's say Luck didn't hang it up. He'd probably be in his prime or, on the 12th hole of an 18-hole course, starting to decline. So here's some more first rounders, though. RG3 that year, Tannehill, Whedon. Then you get into EJ Manuel, Blake Bortles, Manziel, Bridgewater, Winston, Mariota go 1 and 2. And then Goff and Wentz go 1 and 2. And then Paxton Lynch is a first rounder that year. Wow. Trubisky. I mean, so then you get to 2017 where Mahomes is drafted. And now you're starting to get some dudes again. Mahomes, Watson. But from 2010 to 2016, Luck's like the only good guy I mentioned, and he's gone.
You got 0.
Right.
Wow.
It's crazy. I mean, not to mention Mayfield and Darnold and Rosen and other sort of recent misses, but those guys should be in their prime right now. Haskins, Lock's a 2. But, I mean, wow. I mean, that's a long stretch of not bringing in high-quality quarterbacks. And I think that's a big reason why this stat is what it is with all those dudes retiring.
It's funny you mentioned Henny, too. Henny is tied with Patrick Mahomes and I believe Jimmy Garoppolo with the most rings in the NFL right now.
Wow. Okay. There's not even a defensive player that happened to be on a few teams or wow. Okay.
There might be
maybe you're talking about quarterbacks. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Quarterback. There's a bunch of Chiefs now that have 2.
That makes sense.
But even looking at defensive players, there's not that many. There's a couple of Eagles that have a couple, right? Or no, the Eagles didn't win. I was chalking up the Eagles a Super Bowl win. They lost that. Sorry, Eagles fans, to open that wound up again. But it's just when I saw that, and it just never dawned on me. And so shout out to Mel and shout out to
it's awesome
for bringing that statistic up. It's really unbelievable, and it could go even further in the other direction. Like there might be only Patrick Mahomes very soon
from now,
is a starting quarterback in the NFL that won a Super Bowl as a starting quarterback.
I think there's a better chance there's fewer of them next year than there is right now.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? It probably will go down. I mean, Allen could get one or whatever. The last nugget on that is I do feel like, I think you agree with me, but we went through a quarterback desert. I just mentioned all those guys that didn't hit. And there's probably a research that needs done. Were all those guys terrible prospects, or was the league doing something wrong and not catering to quarterbacks as well then either? They didn't change things for Lamar and Allen back then as much. They just shoved them into a square peg into a round hole and said, "Oh, you stink. You're bad." But they also weren't great prospects probably too. But do you agree? I think we're out of the desert though. I think we're getting to the forest and the Burrows and Herberts and Hurts, and I think it's promising again.
Yeah, yes and no, because remember last year at this time, it felt like we had a podcast talking about the quarterback carousel, and for the first time ever, it felt like, man, maybe there's even too many starting or potential, or you feel good about who the starting quarterback is. Maybe the first time ever, there's too many versus the jobs available for the 32 teams. And then you fast forward one offseason, and all of a sudden, nope, that didn't happen. Half of them sucked again. You know what I mean? It's like, it's pretty wild how that goes.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Burrow, Allen, Herbert, and we can go on, probably name 3 or 4 other guys, are going to be really good players and have really good careers.
Yes.
Probably. But at this time, if you did a top 10 list, Deshaun Watson was on it. Kyler Murray was like 10 or 11. I mean, people are falling off the list. You know what I mean? Carr was like 11 or 12 on most lists,
Yes.
So a couple guys fell off.
And even the years where there were some hits, and you look at Watson and Mahomes. Well, there was still Trubisky who went before both.
Both of them.
And when you look at Josh Allen, okay, that was great. And Lamar Jackson, that was really cool. But there was Mayfield and Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen.
Yeah.
I think we got to take that clarity into this draft where everyone's tripping over themselves to talk about how high is Will Levis going to go? How high is Anthony Richardson going to go? You're going to trade up to number 1 for a 5'11", 190-pound quarterback. History tells us that's not going to go good for multiple teams that we're talking about in the NFL draft.
I mean, Haskins and Daniel Jones finally turned the corner. What's Jordan Love? What's Trey Lance? Zach Wilson looks pretty brutal, So even recent memory is not looking kind to a lot of these guys.
Yes. All right. Next, let's talk a little bit about Patrick Mahomes, a team that did hit on their first round quarterback in the Kansas City Chiefs. And we'll talk Philadelphia Eagles as well. What's the to-do list look like for these teams going into 2023? Today's episode brought to you by our very good friends at Built Bar. I always love when I get a Built Bar package show up at my doorstep, and sometimes I don't even know. They take really good care of us, and they'll take really good care of you because you can get a protein bar that darn near tastes like a candy bar. It's so good. If you want that delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, you got to try Built Bar. Built Bar has been part of my plan even before the holidays. It wasn't even a New Year's resolution for me, but I know a lot of you started those. And if you're trying to stick with it still here into February, Built Bar is a part of it. It was a part of it for me because low calorie, low sugar with high protein is exactly what I'm looking for every day. And I'm doing pretty well. I'm down over 5 pounds since before Christmas when I started this, and feeling pretty good. And then I'll be down 10 pounds pretty soon here, So I'm feeling great about it, hitting the gym more, feel more satisfied when I reach for a treat that is high in protein. And I call it a treat because you feel like you're getting a treat with Built Bar. Healthy is actually tasty. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And I'm talking, yes, that is right, real actual chocolate. And come in unbelievable flavors. I don't know how they do it. Churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. The peanut butter flavors are my favorite, but they've got the Built Puffs as well. Tons of different options at Built.com. Only 130 calories in most Built Bars with only 4 grams of sugar and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you can find Built Bars on store shelves as well, including your local Walmart or Sam's Club. So head to Walmart today. The pharmacy section, you can find 4 bar boxes of flavors like cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs. Or at Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box of hit flavors like brownie batter and churro, and then you can thank us later. And of course, you can find all the flavors and varieties at Built.com. Thanks once again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen. Make sure you check out everything else the network has to offer. Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Draft, and of course, your team is covered every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Patrick Mahomes at the Super Bowl parade, Matt, told Kansas City Chiefs fans, I don't even know what rebuilding is. So does it even matter when you got Andy Reid, you got Patrick Mahomes, you got Travis Kelce? Matt, does it even matter what the Kansas City Chiefs do from here until May?
Not as much as other teams. I mean, when you have that guy, I mean, I think their philosophy now is if we give this dude an O-line, we'll be fine. And of course, and I do think that was their version of a rebuild, which is frightening because I'm looking at right now at their offseason resources. They have a lot of cap space. They have quite a bit of draft capital, despite picking at the end of the round. I think they have one of the Dolphins picks still from Tyreek trade. Don't quote me on that. And with the big contracts that Kelsey, Chris Jones, Mahomes has, they can restructure and open up more. So on this chart that I have, they have about the 10th most offseason resources in the league, which is amazing for a Super Bowl team. And I'm looking at their free agents right now too. And I don't know if this is by design or not, but they're all at like 3 positions. I mean, there are 2 nose tackles on the roster, Nandi and Kalen Saunders. Both are up. Okay, sign one of them, draft the nose in the 3rd round, whatever. Big deal. Both tackles are up. That's a big deal, though, to me. Andrew Wiley's the weakest link on that line, but he's a starting right tackle, and any starting right tackle is expensive. Orlando Brown is coming off the franchise tag. And frankly, I think he's one of the most overrated players in the league. And they helped those guys a lot this year with multiple tight end sets. And maybe you just have to bite the bullet and franchise Brown again, knowing you're overpaying him, and just say, we'll try to develop somebody, because you're not going to get a starting left tackle with the 31st pick. And then Hardman, Juju, and Justin Watson, not that that's a big deal, are all free agents too. So any mock should probably have a tackle or a wide receiver as the Chiefs' first pick. Those are the spots that are getting hit the hardest.
Yep. We're on the same wavelength here. And I looked at their roster and I thought the exact same thing. And I think I think they can rely on and expect more from Sky Moore in year 2.
Yeah,
Pretty much every rookie wide receiver you could say that about. They should have that year 2 bump, and a lot of times year 3 bump as well for young wide receivers. And we've seen him make some plays, and it didn't really start out that he was doing much this year. But I think they could pencil him in and feel really good about Sky Moore being one of those receivers going forward. But they still need depth behind him. So whether it's the pick 31, whether it's in the 2nd round, 3rd round, I think looking at wide receiver, even double dip and drafting a couple of those guys is key. But offensive tackle is number 1. And the way it's funny, maybe we've been doing this podcast too long together, but I thought the same thing. It was like, if you could fit it in, and they might have to restructure some things, and it's tough when you have a really expensive quarterback and you have a veteran roster, you might have to lose some pieces, but it's so key. And one of the reasons Patrick Mahomes has been protected so well this year, obviously they've put resources in the offensive line. I think that's really important to continue to do, but he's gotten the ball out as quick as he ever has.
It's unbelievable.
It's just part of his development as a quarterback. And which is why I like, Sky Moore so much going forward. I don't think they need to spend on Juju. I think they can let him walk.
Yeah.
Sky Moore rolls into that role, plays into the slot, plays outside. You can do a number of things there, but continue to add talent, of receiving talent to the football team. They got a 7th round, running back. They don't have to spend there at all. You can let Clyde Edwards-Helaire walk, but pick 31, maybe it's even a trade up situation. Get yourself the best offensive tackle you can. And if you can franchise tag Brown one more time, and maybe a team comes calling in trade, well, there's your extra draft pick to draft an offensive tackle instead, maybe anyway. But you're developing a future left tackle, but also maybe trying to get a current right tackle as well. Tackle, I think, for the Kansas City Chiefs. And you mentioned it, like getting a nose tackle, then maybe it's just re-signing Colin Saunders, because
he's fine.
It costs too much, but you can find that on day 2, day 3. You can find a nose tackle, and they need to do that. But offensive tackle, priority number 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs.
One thing I want to take back, though, is generally speaking, you don't find starting left tackles at the end of the 1st round. But studying this draft, I mean, that dude Jones from Ohio State, that's even bigger than Orlando Brown.
He's the perfect. That's like the guy that's getting right. And I actually compared him to Trent Brown, the other Brown.
Yeah, good call.
So, one of the Browns. Massive human. You have to orbit around the player to get home, right?
Yeah.
And so that would be
there,
fit, and he could absolutely be there. I think that's actually the perfect range for him. I think he's a late round 1, early round 2 type of a guy. So who better to learn from? Have 2 massive tackles this year, and then maybe plug him in. Maybe he's only a right tackle long term and not a left tackle, and you got to find something else there. But if you look at historically NFL drafts, and this is anecdotal because I don't have like the exact numbers in front of me, it really feels like there's a ton of busts late round one offensive tackles because people try to force it because the true blue chippers aren't there anymore at offensive tackle late in round one. And you see a lot of picks where it's like, well, he looks the part, but he's not quite that good of a player, or he is a good player, but he's probably a guard. And so that's what you end up with a lot of at the end of round one. So it is a little bit difficult. They might have to maneuver their way around, but DeJuan Jones is a really interesting prospect for them.
Yeah, he is. I mean, considering they have someone that's kind of a carbon copy.
Yes.
Oklahoma and Tennessee also has a guy that's projected late round one, early round two, and maybe they could sit a year, whatever. If I don't know if people remember, but in my mock, I had them taking a tight end in the first round, which probably they don't have that luxury considering their wide receiver tackle situation that we laid out. But it's a great tight end draft, and there will be a good one available. And I would love to see one plug in immediately as the 2 and learn from Kelsey. Like, what a great mentor to have as a first-round tight end. And they play a ton of 12 personnel anyway.
Yeah, and I would add, not only do they have multiple tight ends on the field and know and love how to use tight ends, but if Kelsey gets hurt, let's say Kelsey gets banged up for 3 weeks.
Right.
What happens to the offense? I think it changes things. Even though you got Mahomes, and we're talking about how they need to add depth with other receivers. What if you, God forbid, lose Kelsey for maybe a season? Right. So it's not nothing to try to find, whatever those receivers are, whether whoever's the top player on your board, if it's a wide receiver, if it's a slot guy, if it's a dynamic tight end, whatever it is, that's definitely something that's got to be on the Kansas City's radar.
Yeah, and if you play a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, you don't need your receiver depth, or your receiver need gets lessened a little bit.
And spending
a tackle problem,
whether it's a tackle or a corner or a wide receiver, you want to spend on one of those impact positions and utilize the power of the 5th-year option too, if you're the Chiefs, because money's going to be tough, and that's where it gets most difficult, I think, for really good teams, is those expensive positions. So you got an expensive quarterback, finding edge, finding stud D linemen, offensive tackles, wide receivers. It gets more difficult because you have to spend high-end resources on those guys. So 5th-year option becomes pretty powerful.
No question. You're dead on.
Next, the Philadelphia Eagles came up a little bit short, but they did one thing that was more important than anything the franchise could have done. What else can they do on top of that? Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. NFL season is over. That doesn't mean you can't bet on NFL football, though. There's draft props at FanDuel. There is NFL futures. Who's going to win the Super Bowl next year? You can find those odds. And no surprise, it is the Kansas City Chiefs once again that are the favorite to win the next Super Bowl, followed by the Bills and the Eagles and the 49ers, and I believe it's the Cowboys finishing up the top 5. And it's also the midpoint of the NBA season. It's a perfect time to download FanDuel because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure. The website is super easy to use. I love how easy it is to maneuver that website. You can find point scores, money lines, threes drained in a game if you're betting on the NBA. Plus, FanDuel makes it super easy to combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. The Philadelphia Eagles, Matt, did the one most important thing you can do as an NFL franchise in the 2022 season, aside from winning a Super Bowl. They came up one game short there, but they got their quarterback.
Yeah.
They know they believe in their head coach. And head coach quarterback is the most important combination you can have in the NFL. We've seen how important it is for the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Philadelphia Eagles got to feel really good where they stand right now because they found that. And guess what? They even have a couple of first-round picks to play with as well, which Super Bowl teams don't usually have. One of them is 10.
And get that 10th pick is almost unfair to the rest of the league. However, their situation's a lot different than the Chiefs, in that I don't think they're going away anytime soon. They're about middle of the road with available cap space right now, but they have like zero ability to open up more cap space because the guys you would restructure are all coming up for free agency. Fletcher Cox and guys like that, your foundational players. And you're going to have to pay Jalen Hurts here really soon. You mentioned the 5th-year option. They don't have that at their disposal. Their starting right guard, Saumulo, is up for free agency. Former first-round pick Dillard. Minshew, that doesn't seem like much, but you have to have a backup quarterback. They cost money. You're starting running back, Miles Sanders. You signed Namakong Su and Linval Joseph. They're done. Your first 2 D tackles, Cox and Hargrave, they're up. Your 2 starting linebackers, Edwards and White, they're up. Your 2 starting safeties, Gardner Johnson and Epps, they're up. Pro Bowl corner and Bradbury, he's up. So they knew this was coming, and it's not if you notice their draft last year, their first pick was Jordan Davis. I just mentioned 4 defensive tackles that are going to be a free agent. Their second pick was Cam Jurgens, a center. And Kelsey, is he going to be back? Could Jurgens plug in at right guard? He's much different, though. I mean, they always want big, hulking guards to play next to the smaller center. And then their third pick was Kobe Dean. So they're all positions.
You mentioned Jurgens.
Yeah.
Because it was we're preparing. We got a true set athletic style to
carbon copy.
And we haven't heard yet from Kelsey if he's retiring or not. I think if they would have won, we might have heard, a sort of that sort of a speech in something from Kelsey. But it looks like at this point he's coming back. I guess that's probably not a guarantee, but we probably would have heard if he was going to retire by now, maybe. Jurgens at guard, maybe it's dirty for a year and then he slides into center, but it's probably not the ideal situation. But, he was a prospect they drafted in the second round. They really like him. And you might have to get by like that for a year and still look at the position and draft maybe the hulking guy that comes in red shirts, or at least competes with Jurgens at guard if Kelsey's going to stick around. Because they're definitely not going to kick Kelsey out the door.
No, right. And I would think Suamulo will make a fair buck, coming off the best lines in the league. And especially once they extend Hurts. But the days of bringing in more than you lose are probably done for the Eagles. Now it's just maintain.
Do you remember who you had for the Eagles with the 10th pick in your mock draft, Matt? I'm trying to put my thinking cap on. What's the ideal scenario for the Philadelphia Eagles in the draft with their 2 extra first round picks? Are they just attacking needs at this point? Or are they still have a quarterback that's going to get paid big at some point, but he's still not super expensive? So can they go out on the free agent market and maybe attack those needs and just let the best players fall to them in the NFL draft?
Well, I had them taking an edge guy. I forget which one I gave them. And then I had them take a corner with their pick. And it's a really deep corner draft. Bradbury's up, as I mentioned. But I wanted to mention Brandon Graham, too. I mean, he was drafted in 2010. I mean, how much longer are you going to have Brandon Graham? He's been an all-time great Eagle as well. So that's why I went edge with them. I've seen a lot of people mocking Bijan Robinson to the Eagles. And while that's frightening as can be, that's just not what they do. I mean, they're smart about running backs, and they're going to draft big people or corners. I promise.
It doesn't fit their MO.
No.
And learn from the Chiefs when they drafted the top running back in, what was that, the 2020 draft in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It was like, it was a luxury and an at that point. And Bijan Robinson's a great prospect.
Sure.
But as good as a running back is, it's just not going to move the needle like some of those other positions. And if you've got gaping holes in your offensive line, that running back's not going to have anywhere to run, and your quarterback's going to get hit, and your season's going to go south. So I mean, it's a nice luxury to have. And if he's there at their second first-round pick, maybe you think about it.
Maybe.
And I just can't see it. I don't think it's an organizational philosophy for them to draft a running back that high and spend the resources there. They're a really analytically driven team, which is, the teams that are least likely to draft a running back high or spend a whole bunch on a running back. So I've seen that a few times. I don't know where Bijan Robinson's going to go. He could go from 10 to 31, basically. I have a feeling he'll go high just because he'll end up being the top prospect on a board at some point. And I think, there'll be teams that value running backs more, and they'll look at the board and they'll say, well, we value these other positions, but the guy with the highest grade is Bijan. So let's take the guy with the highest grade. At some point in the first round, that's going to happen.
But not at 10, not to this team.
No,
this team's as predictable as they come. They're going to take linemen, and I could see a corner if Bradbury goes, and it sets up well for that. They've had great success doing it. one other little nugget. Gardner Minshew is probably going to make a decent buck on the open market. I mean, we saw 60 or 70 quarterbacks start games. Well, Minshew's 30th, 35th on that list. I mean, he's going to have value to somebody, but I would look for somebody that's a rugged ball carrier as Hurts' replacement, not a Minshew type.
And the idea of a backup quarterback is, okay, if our quarterback goes down, this guy can come in and win some games. They didn't do that when Gardner Minshew came in.
Right. It
was like, oh, this is very different. And so I don't think it's helping you that much to spend that much on a backup quarterback either. So I don't know if that means you go to the draft again at quarterback and try to develop somebody, or, late round pick plus, but you probably don't spend, and I don't know what Gardner Minshew is going to make, but you're not spending $10 million on a backup quarterback.
Not with 2 safeties, 2 linebackers, 3 defensive tackles, starting guard, all those guys up. Can't do it. You could do it last year. Can't do it anymore.
And you mentioned the defensive line, like Jordan Davis. I mean, he's a monster of a dude, but he's got to progress too. I think he's got to be better than he was last year. And you shouldn't have needed to add Ndamukong Suh to that defense. When you looked at the personnel and you looked at the guys they already had, and that shouldn't have been necessary. And so they still have to add to the defensive line, but I think a big part of their defensive line is Jordan Davis becoming that dude in the middle.
Yeah. I also like Milton Williams, that he drafted in the 3rd round a couple years ago. He's much different. He's an athlete, but he has some upside. But you're right. I mean, on Super Bowl Sunday, Jordan Davis was 5th in their defensive tackle usage. I mean, it's Cox, Hargrave, Sue, Joseph, Davis, he should be better than that. And those guys are good. I mean, it's not like he has a bunch of bums in front of him, but he was 5th on the depth chart, basically.
So that's the starting point for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles going into the 2023 season. Can they get back to Super Bowl 58? Thanks, everybody, for listening to Peacock and Williamson every single day. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL Draft. We've got a couple of new hosts, and I think it's going to be a fantastic podcast for everybody every day heading into the NFL Draft. And we are fully in NFL Draft season. Tons of NFL Draft conversations coming up here on Peacock and Williamson as well. And we'll talk to you tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.